Welcome to the TV Lounge, a place where we get together to view and discuss lesser-known TV series. You know, there are plenty of places to discuss the latest hit shows, but we're here to tell you about some older programs you might not have heard of or watched. Some are quite good, and others, well, they're worthy of discussion and dissection. So have a seat here in the extra recliner and join us in the TV Lounge. Well, here we are, episode 2, but it's the third podcast. That's what I get for starting with numbering the first one double zeros.
Yeah, what do you do? That throws everything off from then on out, starting with zero.
It really does. But this is officially number 2 of the TV Lounge, and I think I did that just to keep in line with the episodes that we're dealing with our first show, Crime Traveler, because it's the second Crime Traveler episode that we're going to be looking at as well. Right. And Andy, did you happen to look at the website and notice some comments we got on the blog?
I did. We actually got some people on the website left a couple comments there.
Yeah, I thought I'd just run through those real quick. We got a comment from Chelsea from the Long Con podcast. Now, the Long Con podcast is 3 gals who talk about the TV show Leverage. And they have a pretty darn good podcast about leverage. She said, "Isn't it classic that shows with the most potential often never get a chance to go past one season?" She says, "Great first episode. You both have those booming radio voices that work so well to keep attention. I never watched this show, but now I feel like I should." Wade from Florida, who is someone, and the next commenter as well, are guys that I know from the forums over at the Sci-Fi Dig podcast. Anyway, Wade says, "Great show, guys. I had never heard of Crime Traveler before this. Thanks for filling us in. There are a lot of great shows out there that meet your criteria. I hope you'll give some consideration to the adventures of Briscoe County Jr. or Max Headroom sometime in the future."
And I'm glad he brought up those. Briscoe County is definitely a show that I remember seeing a few episodes of, and that's one that I personally would like to look at for sure.
Well, I know since reading this comment, you and I have both put Briscoe County into our Netflix queues. And as far as Max Headroom goes, we have copies of the Max Headroom series as well.
Right.
I think there were only about 14 regular episodes, but those are a couple we might go into. Now, let me get this other comment out of the way, and then I wanted to talk about some other shows that we might look at. The last comment was Shane, who said, "Great first show, gents. I did see Crime Traveler when it was broadcast in Australia, and to be perfectly honest, I hated it. I could have sworn it ran for longer than 8 episodes. It sure felt longer. I stayed with the show until the very bitter end, hoping it would get better, but alas, it didn't. Regardless of the quality of Crime Traveler, I enjoyed the podcast, and I'm looking forward to the next episode." Well, I'd like to say thanks to everybody that left those comments, and I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the shows that we were looking at when we first started considering the TV Lounge podcast. I originally wrote down a list of about, 25 shows, and I have kind of narrowed it down to a half a dozen that I think would be really good. Well, one of those would be a good selection for our next one. Hey, Andy, what do you think of the idea of putting up a poll on the website to see what we should cover after we're done with Crime Traveler?
I think that's a good idea. Put up a handful of shows and kind of see what people are most interested in hearing about.
Now, the ones that I had flagged as the ones I'd like to look at, before anything else, The Flash, The Invaders, and I mean the original from 1967, Erie, Indiana, that's a show you and I both liked.
Yeah.
Special Unit 2, that was a great show. I thought that was really funny. Journeyman.
Yeah, I love Journeyman.
I love Journeyman a lot, too, and I think it would be fun to look at Journeyman again. Even though we didn't get complete closure, it would be fun to look at the episodes from the perspective of knowing how the series did end.
Right, and I think that one ran, 13 episodes, something like that?
12 or 13 episodes, yeah. That's correct.
So not too long, but I thought it was a good story.
And now that Wade has mentioned it, as we say, we're going to put Briscoe County and Max Headroom on that list as well. Yeah. Finally, there's another show, a British show from the, I can't remember if it was the late 60s or early 70s. I think it actually ran 3 seasons. It was called The Champions. You probably never heard of that one, have you?
No, I've heard of it just from you, but other than that, I haven't. Now, isn't that
It's the one where you have these three, I guess you would call them agents for, I guess they're like spies, but they're agents for a government agency. They get in a plane wreck somewhere in the Himalayas, and they acquire these superhuman abilities. I've only watched the first couple of episodes, and it's not bad.
Is that the one where there's an episode kind of at the beginning with an invisible guy or something? Is that the show?
Yeah, that's the second episode where they have some invisible guy.
Yeah.
So those are a list of some of the shows that we are considering doing on the TV Lounge podcast. I think with all a list like that, all these great shows, we could be doing this for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, what say we get into our recap of this episode of Crime Traveler? It's episode number 2. It's called A Death in the Family. Jeff Slade and Holly Turner go to a bank where Holly attempts to get a loan. While there, Slade sees a man acting suspiciously. While Slade watches the man, Holly learns that she's being turned down for a loan.
Now, we did extend your overdraft last June, Miss Turner, but it seems that you've exceeded it again.
Does it?
Which does make the question of a loan. If you don't mind me saying so, you do seem to have something of an obsession with electronic equipment.
I wouldn't call it that.
This payment here, UCX Electronics, what sort of equipment is it exactly?
I'm sorry.
Hi-Fis? PCs?
It's my work, Miss Stevens.
Bev, please. Mr. Spencer told me you were with the police.
I am a science officer with the police, yes. But as it happens, Bev, I'm also exploring the effects of tachyon bombardment on the atomic substructure. On my afternoons off, of course.
Oh.
And I really came here for a loan, not a lecture. So if you're not going to give it to me, why don't you tell me now so I can leave you and go and be a grown-up again?
Slade apprehends the would-be bank robber.
We then see Slade and Holly back at the police station. Slade has the handcuffed prisoner in tow, and Holly says she's going to resign as the police science officer.
I'm resigning, Slade.
What?
You heard me. This whole thing is ridiculous. Scrimping and saving to buy advanced electronics I cannot even begin to afford.
Didn't get the loan then?
What am I doing in a police department? I'm not a police officer, I'm a quantum physicist.
Hey, don't put yourself down.
I could be working in a university or any electronics company. Research, development. Who needs a bank anyway?
Look, you go to university, all those scientists looking over your shoulder. How much longer do you think you're going to be able to keep your little secret a secret? You're good at this job, Holly. It suits you. You're virtually your own boss. You're respected.
And underpaid. I mean, it's crazy. I don't even enjoy police work. I should never have started it in the first place. But that's it. I'm through.
After turning over his prisoner to another officer, Slade tries to come up with alternatives for getting Holly more money. He suggests a grant or perhaps rich relatives. Slade and Holly are then called into Grisham's office by Nikki. She briefs him on a murder at a fancy restaurant.
The report's just come through. A poisoning in a 5-star restaurant.
The food?
I hardly think so, Slade. This is a world-class chef, and apparently there was a food inspector on the premises when it happened. According to the report, cause of death was a dose of poison, KCN.
Potassium cyanide, white crystals.
Traces of it were found inside the victim's wine glass.
Who was the victim?
Her name was Mary Chandler. There's a photograph here just come through.
Wait a minute, Chief.
What is it, Turner?
I know her, Mary Chandler. She's my aunt.
It turns out the victim was Holly's aunt, Mary Chandler. Learning of Holly's relationship to the victim, Grisham decides to handle the case herself with the help of Detective Morris. Holly receives a phone call, and she and Slade go to a lawyer's office where Holly learns that she has been named in her aunt's will, along with the aunt's partner, Alex Morton. The inheritance could be in the millions. The attorney also tells Holly that her aunt was about to change her will, but she was murdered the night before she could make that change. As they leave the attorney's office, Slade suggests they go back in time and see who killed the aunt.
So how's it feel?
What?
To be a millionaire?
I don't know. I just want to find out who killed her, Slade.
There's not much chance of that with Grisham and Morris on the case. Could always travel back.
What?
Go back. Time travel. See who did it. See who put the poison in the glass. Maybe we could even save her.
No.
£2 million, Holly. That's all the money you're going to need to perfect the machine. Don't you think you owe her?
Holly and Slade are back at Holly's apartment where she is warming up her time machine and complaining about how much repair work it needs. As the machine starts up, a component explodes, stopping the machine and taking out the power in the building. When Slade and Holly go to find the main fuse box, they run into Danny, the maintenance man, and we hear people pounding on the door of the elevator, trapped on the inside.
Danny?
It's crazy. This whole place is crazy.
It's the main fuse.
I get the bills from the electric. Do you know how many units they say we use? 27,000. You could light up a stadium with that.
Well, can you fix it?
I've got people stuck in the lift. I've got people in the dark. I can fix it, sure.
Great.
As soon as Danny replaces the blown fuse, the time machine is ready to go. Slade and Holly travel back to the day before. They then drive out to the house where Holly's aunt lives. While they are chatting with her, a young man, Alex Morton, comes down the stairs. He is Mary's current boyfriend, and he's asking Mary if she remembered to take it. He is going with her to a luncheon at the restaurant where she will be poisoned. Holly wants to warn her aunt, but doesn't. When Slade and Holly leave, Slade tries to convince Holly to do something to stop the murder.
You were going to stop her going, weren't you?
No.
You could have done that, couldn't you?
No, I keep on telling you can't change the
past. I know, the first right time.
You of all people should know that by now, Slade.
So is that it? We're just going to stand here and watch her go to her death?
There's nothing we can do.
We can try. Or maybe you don't want to.
What? Well,
Don't blame you. An hour from now, all this is going to be yours. If she dies.
that's such a horrible thing to say, Slade.
Well, then let's try and stop it.
Okay, we'll try. But it won't work.
We'll see about that.
At the restaurant, Mary goes in alone, leaving the boyfriend Alex outside. When Holly and Slade arrive, Slade outlines a plan of action.
It was the potassium cyanide in the white wine, so all we have to do is make sure she doesn't drink any wine.
How do we do that?
Well, you stay in the kitchen and make sure no one tampers with the bottles, and I will be in the restaurant.
Inside, the maitre d' shows Mary Chandler to her table, where we meet the people she's having lunch with, Robert, Ian, and Amanda. Slade knocks out a waiter and dresses in his uniform. Meanwhile, Holly has entered the kitchen posing as a person from the Department of Hygiene, Miss Kenwood. In the restaurant, Slade overhears some conversation at the table that sounds like Holly's Aunt Mary is blackmailing her lunch companions.
Mary, we didn't invite you here because we enjoy your company.
Dear Ian, yes, I thought you'd be the first to speak your mind.
We've invited you here to tell you these demands of yours have gone on long enough.
And trust a dentist to spoil a nice lunch. Are you part of this conspiracy, Amanda?
We shouldn't have paid you in the first place. We should have gone straight to the police.
I would have thought the police were the last people you'd want to know about this.
Mary orders the fatal wine. Slade picks up her glass from the table, complaining that it's dirty, and goes to the kitchen. He has Holly get a clean glass while he selects the wine. He figures that way no one can manage to poison Mary Chandler.
I choose the bottle, you choose the glass. I open it and pour. I'm there while she drinks. What could possibly go wrong?
As Slade attempts to keep an eye on Mary, another customer steps up to him demanding to know where his wine order is. And for a few seconds, Slade is unable to see the events at the table. Mary is somehow poisoned and she dies. As Slade and Holly run from the restaurant, Mary's boyfriend Alex enters.
Slade and Holly return to Mary's home and break in. Slade believes that in those few seconds, when he could not see the table, one of the other people put the poison in Mary's wine glass. He also explains to Holly that the three people at the table were being blackmailed by Holly's aunt. Slade asks Holly about her late uncle. She says he was an accountant. They find papers in the house indicating that Robert, Ian, and Amanda were clients of her late uncle. Taking the papers they got at the house, Slade and Holly return to the police department to check the names of other people with the police computers. As they step from the elevator, they run into a startled and very nervous Nikki. Kate Grissom enters the room and has Holly arrested for the murder of her aunt.
Turner!
Yes, Chief?
I have to tell you, Turner, this is the most depressing day of my entire police career.
Well, I told you wouldn't enjoy working with Morris.
I'm arresting you for the murder of your aunt.
Grissom explains the case against Holly.
This morning, you told me that you hadn't seen your aunt for a year.
Yes, Chief.
But according to her partner,
Alex Morton.
you were actually at the house minutes before the lunch, so why did you lie to me?
I was confused.
You don't think it was a bit coincidental, turning up at the house on the very morning she was killed?
I do, yes.
What?
You're right, it was a coincidence.
I've spoken to the solicitor.
Bradley Herman.
I know about the will. Your aunt had divided her estate equally between you and Alex Morton.
And she was about to change it. But you don't know how she was going to change it.
I've also spoken to the restaurant manager.
Eduardo.
Thank you, Morris. I've also spoken to the restaurant manager about this food inspector, a Miss Kenwood.
It wasn't me.
Then how do you explain this? This is the wine glass that poisoned Mary Chandler. There are 2 sets of fingerprints on it. Hers and mine.
As Holly is being booked into the jail, she has to give up her time machine wristwatch. In the cell, Holly blames Slade for their predicament, but Slade assures her he can solve the crime and get her out in time. He goes to interrogate the people at the table, starting with Robert Blake.
Mr. Blake, I'd like to talk to you about Mary Chandler.
Oh, you're the police. I've already told you, people.
But you haven't told us about your accounts.
What?
Edward Chandler was your accountant, wasn't he?
Yes, but it was all above board.
Really? You, Ian Carter, and Amanda Hayes. Crooked accounts. And Mary Chandler was threatening to shot the 3 of you.
No, it wasn't like that. It's not true.
Which one of you did it, Blake? Was it you who put the poison into a glass?
No, I couldn't.
Well, it must have been one of you. So which one?
I don't know. Don't talk to me. Talk to Amanda. The lunch was her idea. Mary was making demands from all of us. Amanda found out and suggested we all join together and then confront Mary in the restaurant.
Confront her or kill her?
I didn't kill her. I was completely shocked.
Slade then goes to where Amanda Hayes is doing a book signing of her latest novel.
And with the police, Miss Hayes. Seems you're making quite a bit of money out of murder.
Murder fiction, yes. But the fact is I had no reason to kill Mary Chandler. Hardly knew her.
Mary Chandler was blackmailing you. And I was under the impression that the lunch was your suggestion.
My, you have been busy.
I want the truth.
It was potassium cyanide that killed her, wasn't it?
How do you know that?
I used it. In Death by Design. My first novel. I recognize the symptoms. Where could someone like me get a poison like that? They don't hand it out at the local chemist.
So, that leaves Ian Carter.
Who just happens to run his own chemical company.
Now it's on to talk with Ian Carter, who runs a chemical company that stores the poison used to kill Mary Chandler.
You know, Mary Chandler was seeking our financial support. That's how she would have put it.
She was blackmailing you.
She'd invested unwisely. An office development somewhere in the north. She decided we'd make up the difference.
And so you invited her to lunch?
Not to kill her, to warn her off. Even if I had stolen that cyanide, how could I put it in her glass without the other 2 seeing me? Think about it. None of us could have done it without the others seeing.
All 3 of you had a motive.
Yes. But of course we weren't the only ones.
Back at the jail, Nikki takes some food to Holly. She overpowers him and escapes from the cell. But she also frees the bank robber from earlier. Slade then goes to Mary Chandler's house again and talks with Alex Morton.
Mary and me, we were fine. She was crazy about me.
Did you know she was blackmailing Ian Carter and the others?
Yeah, she'd lost a packet, some investment thing.
Did she tell you she was just about to change her will?
Yeah, it was me who persuaded her.
You?
There wasn't so much money anymore, so I told her to cut out the girl. Like I say, Mary would have done anything for me.
Charming. Oh, one last thing.
What?
When we were here earlier, when you came down the stairs, you asked Mary if she'd taken it. What did you mean by that?
Taken it? Oh, yeah, I was talking about a letter. Just some letter she had to post. I guess now we'll never know what was in it.
Thank you.
Back at the jail, Holly manages to elude other personnel. The bank robber hides in the women's restroom just as Grissom is entering, and Holly retrieves her personal effects, including the time machine watch, which is buzzing a warning. The guard on duty hears the watch and comes to investigate. He discovers the empty cells and sounds an alarm. But Holly takes a key and heads to the parking garage where she steals a police car. Morris and a couple of officers attempt to stop her. Grissom puts out an order to find Holly Turner.
Driving back to her apartment to return to the time machine before the countdown ends, her car wrecks into Slade's car. With both their cars out of commission, they start running back to Holly's apartment. At the same time, Grissom and Nikki arrive at Holly's building and get stuck inside the elevator when the power goes out. Freed from the elevator, they go to Holly's apartment, where Slade says he knows who really killed Mary Chandler. He arrests the boyfriend Alex and explained how it happened.
Alex Morton knew that Mary was having lunch with the three people that were blackmailing her, which gave him the perfect opportunity.
To kill her?
Yes. You see, Alex lied to me. It wasn't Holly being cut out of the will, it was him. And when he found that out, he was determined to stop it happening.
It's not true. I couldn't have done it. I wasn't even in the restaurant.
You didn't need to be. Mary had taken the poison before she left. Have you taken it, Mary? That's what you asked her when Holly and I were there. You told me you were talking about a letter. Takes a funny word when you're talking about a letter, isn't it? Have you remembered the letter? Have you got the letter? But if you're talking about medicine, if you're talking about a pill, have you taken it? And she had, hadn't she? Nicky?
Mary Chandler had high blood pressure, Chief. She got these on prescription.
Very simple. He just unscrewed one, emptied out the contents, and filled it with something else. And then he had to just drive to the restaurant and wait outside.
But we found traces of poison in her wine glass.
Alex Morton put the cyanide crystals in the glass after she was dead. Don't you see? She was dining with her three worst enemies, three perfect suspects.
And he was waiting outside.
All he had to do was wait in the lobby until he heard the noise. Then he ran in, and in all the confusion, he just slipped some cyanide crystals into the glass.
You!
Alex tries to make a run from the room and is stopped by Slade. Holly returns to the attorney's office with Slade to find out exactly how much she inherits.
Come on, tell me. How much did you get?
5 figures.
5?
High 5. But they were debts, Slade. That's what she left. Debts of 5 figures. All the money's gone. The office development, she was principal investor. That's why she was trying to blackmail Edward's old clients. There was nothing left.
Holly also says that because Grissom mistakenly arrested her, Holly was given a pay bonus. She decides to stay with the police department.
And that concludes the second episode of Crime Traveler, A Death in the Family. Next time, Fashion Shoot. A top fashion designer has been receiving death threats, and the entire division is assigned to guard her forthcoming fashion show. However, all their efforts fail, and she is shot on the catwalk. Or is she? We'll find out on the next episode of Crime Traveler. Well, we've seen the second episode of Crime Traveler, and you know, Andy, one thing that really stood out to me was after being quite emphatic in the first episode about not being able to change the past, then Holly lets Slade convince her to use the time machine in an attempt to do just that. He persuades her by thinking that he can stop her aunt from being murdered.
Right. And, you know, just kind of coming from an audience perspective and thinking about, I guess, from the writer's point of view, it was almost like they sort of needed to prove to the audience that you can't change the past. And so it was like you had to have one episode where they try to change the past, that it just doesn't work and you kind of see what happens. Otherwise, it's just always this kind of loose theory in the background. So
right, where even though they try, it's still the past plays out as it played out originally. And I thought it was interesting at the beginning of the episode when Holly was turned down at the bank for the loan. And then just after that, Slade asks if she has a rich relative she can get some money from. But you notice then she doesn't even mention the fact that she has this rich aunt. She doesn't even say anything about it until later when Grissom briefs them on the murder.
Yeah, it's true. It was a little weird. I thought it was kind of funny when when she went into the bank and she was trying to get a loan. I just had to laugh at the bank teller, just how annoying that lady was. You know, kind of going through Holly's files and looking at all her purchases and saying, it seems that you have an obsession with electronic equipment. What are you buying all these things for? And just really nosy. I
wanted Holly to say, well, I need a new, what was that thing from last episode? A transmogrifier, whatever the heck it was. But she did come up with something really kind of good at the end about tachyon particles.
Yeah, I kind of jabbed her a little bit, so that was funny.
That was pretty good. But again, she didn't tell Slade that she had this rich aunt. Now, later, you remember when Holly's booked into jail and the bank robber from earlier is right there in the next cell?
Yeah.
Now, did you notice he's wearing his overcoat? But Holly, when she's being booked in, she has to, empty her pockets. She even has to take off the time machine countdown watch thing.
Uh-huh.
But you would think that, when you're being booked into jail, they take your coat. They take the contents of anything that you have with you.
Yeah, they kind of just shoved him in the cell. I mean, he could have had a sawed-off shotgun in there or something.
He could have had a knife, or he could have had a pistol.
Yeah.
I mean, his note, you remember the note that he stuck up on the glass at the bank?
Yeah.
Said that, didn't it say he had a gun?
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
it didn't look like anybody had even patted him down or searched him.
Right.
So he's still in the cell just the way he was in the bank.
And you know what was funny about that whole part where he tried to hold up the bank, he puts the note up on the window. All it said was, "I have a gun." But when Slade was watching him write the note, it's like it took him 5 minutes to write the note. All it said was, "I have a gun," but he sat there just agonizing over it. It's kind of funny.
Four little words.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you'd think he was writing, a Shakespearean sonnet or something.
Yeah. Another thing I thought was funny with him is, I don't know if this is standard practice, but when they arrested him and Holly and Slade were bringing him into, to book him into jail, Slade just had the guy's arm handcuffed to his own arm.
Right.
And, I just thought, wow, that is a horrible practice. You're leaving the other guy's other arm free to, knock you out and steal your keys or whatever.
Yeah, and if Slade or Holly had a gun, he could have easily used his free hand to take the gun away from them, or to grab a gun off of any of the passing officers that they met in the hallway.
Oh, yeah, or just grab some blunt object and knock them out, or I don't know if that's like normal police practice over there.
I think it's kind of, put your hands behind your back and you get them both cuffed together.
Yeah. So,
another thing that I like talking about the jail part, I liked it when Holly's escaping from jail, and you remember that she's kind of hiding around the corner, and then Morris walks by with some other guy talking to him.
Yeah.
And Morris talks about he's such a good detective because he has these real keen powers of observation.
Right.
And yet there's Holly right there, escaped from the jail cell, and Morris walks right by her.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Oh, another thing about the stuff that I liked was, so the watch that Holly wears, I mean, the thing is like humongous, and it just looks so, I don't know, it just is funny looking, and
it looks really out of place.
Right. And so she's taken off her, giving all her personal effects, and just the security guy or whoever that was sitting behind the counter just had this really goofy look on his face when she was taking off her watch. Did you notice that?
I did. It's kind of like he's thinking, what is this?
Yeah, he just had a really funny expression on his face.
I think we can also safely assume that the bank robber was recaptured when Grissom caught him hiding in the ladies' room.
Oh, that's true. I guess they kind of never went back to that, but...
Now, I wanted to skip to the end of the episode, unless you've got a thought before the end of the episode that you wanted to pass along.
Well, no, I did have one thing just from a filmmaker standpoint, but I noticed something. It was about 22 minutes into the show when Holly and Slade were in her aunt's office at her house, and they were kind of snooping around and looking through the files.
Okay.
If you watch kind of in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, as the camera is dollying through the room, you can see a shadow of the camera or of the dolly kind of moving across as the camera moves anyway.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'm going to have to go back and look at that. About 22 minutes in, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to check that, and I'm going to look for that shadow.
Yeah.
Well, I think at the very end of the episode, when we hear Slade explaining his reasoning for arresting Alex Morton, it's because he said he heard Alex asking Mary if she had taken it. Now, I think that reasoning was a little bit thin.
Yeah.
There was no real proof that she was taking Alex out of her will. And also, the police did not have Alex in possession of any of the poison. I think if he hadn't tried to escape from the police department, I don't think Slade's case would have been good enough to convict him. It seems awfully circumstantial.
I think you're right. I think if he would have sat there and just kind of been like, yeah, we'll try to prove it, and wouldn't have admitted anything or tried to run it. Yeah, I think you're right. I think they would have had a hard time with that.
Yeah, if he hadn't run, he might not have held up that flag of, ooh, it's me, I did it.
Yeah.
The last thing that I wanted to touch on, and we've noticed this in these 2 episodes, they get back to the time machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much time do they have to spare?
Oh, seconds.
Just seconds. It's kind of like the old bomb cliche.
Yeah.
Cut the red wire, cut the blue wire. Red wire, blue wire. 3, 2, 1, And it's always like 1 second when they defuse the bomb.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling we're going to see this at the end of every Crime Traveler. They're going to get back to the machine just in the nick of time.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
All right. Well, those were the thoughts I had on this episode. Anything else you'd like to add as far as comments on the episode itself?
Just one other thing. We had the first episode where Slade tries to make a bet and win some money. Of course, it fails and he doesn't win the money. Then we have this second episode where there's a chance that Holly could inherit millions of pounds, and then at the end you find out that all she inherited was debt, and so she doesn't get any money. It always drives me nuts when the good guys never keep the treasure or win the money. So hopefully let's maybe see that at some point.
Yeah, they never quite come out on top of things, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be kind of nice. Now, I can't remember in the other episodes if they get any sort of advantage at the end. But this one and the last one, you're right. They end up not getting ahead. And it makes you wonder, did Holly get enough money as a bonus to take care of her aunt's debts or...
Yeah, because she was already in pretty bad shape with her own finances, so...
I guess that's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time, Andy, and we will look at the third Crime Traveler.